Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, and for the first time with this podcast, I'm actually doing this live with somebody else in person, whereas for the last 3 years, whenever I've had a guest on the show, it's been over like some online, podcast recording platform. So I'm joined by my good friend and frequent guest, Aram in Toronto. What's up, Aram?
Hello, Patrick in Toronto now too. So welcome to Toronto. And it's been a while since you've been here.
Yeah. This is my fourth time here. I haven't been here in like 10 years or 9 years or something like that. And, I came here just to record this.
Down the road, down the street, the Wizards are playing the Raptors in an exhibition game, and we're gonna head over and we're gonna talk to Jordan Poole. That's a lie. We're not doing that.
Yeah,
Patrick didn't know that at all.
I have no interest in talking to Jordan Poole, even though I am pulling for him to jack up 40 shots a game.
For sure. I'm going to ask you about that later, too.
Yeah, but, it's great to be in your city. For those you don't know, Aram in Toronto, lives in Toronto. He's from San Francisco, born and raised, lived out here for, almost 20 years at this point. And he's wearing one of the Oakland Warriors t-shirts. So if you want one of these, go to the YouTube channel and click on it. So
soft, comfortable, you won't regret it.
Anyway, a lot to talk about. First and foremost, though, Andre Iguodala announced that he is officially retiring from the National Basketball Association. What are your thoughts on that?
Breaking news, but the kind of breaking news that you were just really expecting. I mean, it was great that he came back last year. It didn't turn out to be really that kind of victory tour that it would have been nice to have, but obviously a lot of good memories of him and how much he elevated the team to that next level, because they were those upstarts, and then he came to the team. Bob Myers worked that crazy trade after they struck out on Dwight Howard, right? Thank God. Talk about alternate universes, but this is the universe that it actually worked out. And I guess my main thing that I thought about was that first championship was so unexpected, 2015, that and he played great. I think when you look back, it's arguable if he or Steph should have gotten the finals MVP. But his impact was really great on this early dynasty for sure. And I just remember in 2015, after that year, I and how well he did in the playoffs, I was like, if I ever meet him, I'm going to give him a hug and tell him thank you.
He would push you off so fast.
Yes.
I think that, I love Andre Iguodala. I remember him in Arizona, and I was like, that dude's in college, because his arms.
Yeah, he had the Ninja Turtle arms back then.
Klay Thompson's dad always talks about his arms. He's like, every man should have like Andre Iguodala arms, and every man does not. But he was the dude that they lost to the Warriors when he was on the Nuggets, and it was like, oh, we're getting like a guy wants to come here. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He wants to come to Golden State, play for the Warriors. He saw what, a lot of us saw in Steph, but from a player's perspective. And that was huge. I didn't want Dwight Howard then. I've talked about how much I don't like him. I didn't want him back then either. And to get him, to get Iguodala and have him just fit seamlessly, and then to take a step back and come off the bench eventually, that's huge. I think when, you talk about his number getting retired, it's like, oh yeah, hell yeah. Because without him, he legitimately probably took less to stay with the Warriors over the years. Yeah. And he could have padded stats. He could have hyped up his own, maybe another all-star game at some point or whatnot, but he just became a role player. And, that selflessness you know, I mean, he's good to go. I'm sure I'm not worried about him financially, but is part of what made this Warriors culture what it is. You know what I mean?
And he was reluctant to do it, right? Like he had to be convinced to do it, and that's fair. I mean, he's been open about that, and it's totally understandable. I mean, so many of us in that position probably wouldn't have done it either, or we would have had a hard time accepting it. So it made a huge difference. Yeah, I mean that it's immeasurable what he did for that early dynasty, especially.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen Iguodala highlights from the Sixers days recently. Like there was a stretch where it would just show up my Instagram feeds and explorers and stuff, and I mean people forget how physically like amazing he is, right? Like that dude could get up, he could fly. Like I've said that Jonathan Kuminga is the most athletic Warrior I've ever seen in my fandom. Like, you know, and if Iguodala was in his prime, it would be like a competition.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Kuminga has a couple inches in height on him and whatnot. So, again, like you said, it's not a surprise. There were times where I was like, oh, he hasn't retired yet? Or like, you know, like I wasn't paying attention over the summer, right? Took a break from basketball. And it was like, oh, that news didn't come out? Like, is he waiting to surprise everybody?
Yeah.
Just, you know, but in your opinion, should he have his number retired? Like, how high does he go in the accolades?
I mean, a lot of those guys from those teams are going to be held in that esteem. So I wouldn't be surprised if his number gets retired.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there's a good handful of people on those teams. I was also thinking, I don't know about you, but I was trying to think of like signature plays. And I mean the strip steal is just like, I mean, he perfected that to the point where, you know, I mean, some of them may have been fouls, but like he was just so well known for being so good at it that he would never get called for a foul for it, you know, and it was amazing. And that he would do it at, in really crucial moments too. So
and you know the finals MVP, weirdly enough, like when you think about it, a lot of it has to do with how great LeBron is. Because Steph had better stats, he was pretty consistent, had maybe like one off game or something, but the hype was around how Iguodala guarded LeBron got his stats, but it was like, oh man, that guy, you know, really put the work in and all this stuff. So, you know, it is what it is. Hindsight, it could and should maybe be Steph, but you know, I think Andre, like his like my favorite Andre stuff is when after, at least I remember 2 clips of winning the Warriors winning the title, and the first thing he does is run and grab the ball. He grabbed the first one. That was like everybody knows that. And then I think against the Celtics, he kept the first one, and I think the Celtics one, he grabbed it and then saved it for Steph, who was, you know, on the ground, you know, in tears and overwhelmed with emotion and whatnot. So, you know.
And if Steph won that first Finals MVP, we wouldn't have gotten the tears, and the narrative wouldn't be so juicy. So it all worked out. It all worked out.
Do you? Okay, so it's pretty clear that he's going to get his number retired. Does he deserve? Like, I just think the idea of statues is silly at this point. But like, do you think he's statue level?
I've never been a statue guy, so it's kind of, you know, it's become this like status thing, which, you know, that's understandable. And I is it because of the Jordan statue?
That was the first one that I remember, because then the Lakers
that's the first one too.
At Staples started doing a bunch.
Yeah, they didn't have a Magic one before, right?
Yeah.
So
definitely not outside the Forum.
Would I say statue? I would say no.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it's kind of a dumb conversation piece, but you know, just seeing the levels of it all, right? Like number retired, statue, and you know, I don't know. I talked about whether or not he'd make the Hall of Fame. I don't know. I know the bar is lower than other Hall of Fames in other sports, but even he himself doesn't think that he's a Hall of Fame guy, but
yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the counting stats of that like back end of his career for sure, but I think it's also the Basketball Hall of Fame looks at other accomplishments out because it's not an NBA Hall of Fame, so collegiate, he was a gold medalist, that kind of thing. Like those things go into the criteria for the Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame. So I don't know, but just back to the statue, I wonder, could it be a different form of art? Maybe a painting, an art installation. 3 channels. Anyway, maybe. Getting into art here, but
performance art.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me ask you. Okay, who are your top 5 Warriors small forwards? Because it's a pretty solid position, especially in recent years for this team.
Yeah, I mean. When you said you wanted to talk about this one, I mean, part of it is like it's a little bit more muddy now because we're in a positionless era,
yes,
right? And so, but having come up in a time where the positions were very, very like delineated and like you are this, right? Then I mean, it's one of those things where the counting stats don't necessarily make him the top one, but you can't argue with the achievements, So, I mean, Chris Mullin's up there in the top 5. Rick Barry, I never saw play. So, I think he was a small forward.
Yeah. He was.
I mean, he'd be a 4 now, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, they all would be, maybe not Chris Mullin, but, and then like because of the like positionless thing, I mean, KD always wanted to be a small forward, but he didn't always play that for the Warriors. It was just the first 5 minutes of the first quarter. Like that's when he was a small forward.
That's
right?
true. They would move to like center, power forward, stuff like that. So I'm not hearing any rankings though.
Oh, I made a list. So,
and it's funny because it's like, what are the criteria? This is just off the top of my head. So criteria is whatever you want. You don't have to have seen them play. And it's one of those things too. Like Rick Barry is associated with the Warriors. Kevin Durant played 3 years with the Warriors. Chris Mullin, he was like dream teamer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, longevity and like kind of terms that they had with the Warriors. And so like that knocks KD down for me because, and so, I mean, if you're making me rank, I would put Rick Barry first. I would put Iguodala second in terms of the winning. I would maybe put Mullin above KD. I'm not saying that they're better. He's better than KD,
right?
But I just in terms of like Warriors Warriors history, then like in terms of what they meant to the franchise, I know that Lakers said like KD's gonna get a statue, and like I was like, really? 3 years? I don't know.
And then who's your 5th?
Oh, it's a toss up between Steven Jackson and Mikal Petrus. I don't know.
That's
Billy Owens. I don't know. What's your ranking?
My criteria is, when I thought of this a few years back, I had KD really high because he was either still with the team or fresh leaving the team, giving up his Achilles, all this stuff. But now there's been some years away, and looking at it as their value and like their association with the Warriors and just how much I can't believe like I would actually put Rick Barry 1. I would put, and this is because it was my formative years, I would put Chris Mullin 2. I would put Andre. Actually, I would put KD 3rd. I put Andre 4th, and I mean, obviously, Jonathan Kuminga 5th.
That story is yet to be written.
Or you could go with Andrew Wiggins or Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes,
Andrew Wiggins, yeah.
They all each have a title,
all NBA
with the
champions,
Warriors,
right?
You know what I mean?
Okay.
I can't think of anyone. You mentioned Billy Owens because that was going to be my blast from the past. Purvis Short. There you go. Purvis Short. He's up in my top 10. I think he would be in the top 10 anyway.
So the season is starting soon.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not gonna go through every team or anything, but I'm curious. There's been a lot of roster changes for the Warriors. I think the roster looks pretty good. It is definitely more crafted towards Steve Kerr's liking. You really get a sense that the people that they have right now in place are who he wants to play, the way he wants to play. It seems like the concession to playing Kuminga is to have some old dudes like around him. And if that means that they are gonna give Kuminga a real shot, then I'm fine with that. And they've looked pretty decent in the in the exhibition games, but in terms of the roster turnover, who's a Warrior, now a former Warrior that was on the team last year that you are going to be watching this year?
Just one?
Just one. I mean, we mentioned Jordan Poole. There's a couple others.
Yeah. If you've listened to this show, I'm going to be watching James Wiseman. I know he had one decent preseason game for the Pistons. I'm just curious to see what happens. He's in another tough situation over there. It would have been better if he ended up on like the Hornets, you know what I mean? Or some team that didn't have a bajillion bigs and centers and whatnot who are all younger or better than him. So I'll be watching that because I'm just curious, because no matter how bad or good he is, he would have been better, obviously, if he didn't get hurt, if he didn't end up in the COVID year, if he got to play more and all that stuff, because he just didn't play. So, but I'm curious to see if we'll ever find a situation that actually works for him, because it's a bummer, because he seems like a good dude. He makes more money than I'll ever see, so I don't feel bad from that respect. But I would have liked to have seen him succeed with the Warriors. And at this point, if he does well somewhere else, I'll be like,
Yeah.
But I do want to see it.
Yeah, I know. It's like if he does well, then it'd be like, but also like, but I'm happy. I mean, but you also see like Trace Jackson Davis, and he knows what they want him to do, and he does it, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, Wiseman just didn't have the opportunity, didn't have the capacity to accept that, didn't know how to process that, all of these things, you know. And you just imagine wow, and Trace Jackson, he looks small, right?
He looks like Klay Thompson.
He's got really long arms and he can get up and he battles, but man, he's small. But you could you imagine somebody with James Wiseman's physical gifts with the ability to do what Trace Jackson Davis is doing. But hey, if we could make an imaginary player, then why would we play the games? But
it would be like Draymond Green with James Wiseman's body.
Yeah. So I that's one that I will always kind of track him. I mean, I am curious, Jordan Poole, will he lead the league in shot attempts? I don't know that he'll lead the league in scoring. Definitely not efficiency, but I'm again, it's similar in that happy for him to have that opportunity, and that's the kind of opportunity that you just realize so much of the league is about opportunity and fit, and luck too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And on the Jordan Poole thing, and I've said this before on recent episodes, it's I'm pulling for Jordan Poole. I got so sick of his game last year. I got sick of the pool party, all that stuff, because I felt do these people who love the pool party not watch defense on the other end?
Right.
Anyway, but I've always sided with him in this whole Draymond punch thing, because I just don't like bullies in general. And I feel like Poole, if he does well, with Wiseman, it's gonna sting. But with Poole, I'll be like, oh yeah, good for him, for kind of sticking it to people and showing them, you know what I mean? And it's funny, I just gotta say, lately I've been listening to stuff and reading stuff about the Warriors, and they're saying it's almost getting crafted that it was Jordan Poole that was the problem.
Yeah.
That despite Jordan Poole, now will their chemistry be okay? But it was Draymond, and not to just keep bringing this back, but it's like this narrative preseason. I know that a lot of these beat writers and a lot of these journalists, they want to stay in the good graces of the Warriors and the PR department, so they're going to say like all the right things and all the nice things. And I think it gets twisted because I'll listen to podcasts just like NBA podcasts in general, and they'll say, oh yeah, Jordan Poole, but like it wasn't him. Sure, he could probably be abrasive and whatnot, but that's always gonna kind of bug me. And I think it's kind of screwed up. But the interesting thing about when you're talking about Trace Jackson Davis is like, there's a few ways you could bring rookies into the league, right? It's like you either bring them in and they are super raw and you give them a ton of time on a bad team, or they are like they've played 4 years at Indiana, and they can come in and do what, low ceiling, but can do what you need them to do, which is like Trace Jackson Davis, hopefully, knock on wood. Or you have the young guys who need time, who can't get it on this team. And I think like, for all the bashing of the 2-timeline stuff, like they have almost as many young guys, right, as they did before. And I think it's just the nature of who they had before. And I've talked about this, but like, hey, if they just didn't use those picks last year and they stuck with, Wiseman, Kuminga, and Moody, then like that's a great starting point, right? Like there's no, I said this, there's no dynasty that I've known of that, like legitimate dynasty, that had 3 lottery picks in 2 years. Yeah. Right. I always say like Len Bias is the best thing I can think of, a team that was in the middle of a championship run that got a high pick. And I don't think there's anyone else, let alone, a 7th pick and then a 14th pick. But, I look forward to some of these young guys. I look forward to Kuminga taking that next step. Watching Pajemski, is that how you say his name? I wasn't high on him over the summer, but like one thing that he has that someone like, I don't know, Nico Mannion and even James Wiseman didn't have is he has like a certain cockiness to him, which someone like him needs, right? And someone like him who is smaller, not crazy athletic for the NBA, and is going to have to fight tooth and nail for everything. So that bodes well for him. Whereas like we always talked about how Wiseman didn't have enough dog in it.
Didn't have a dog in it. No.
Anyway.
I mean, when Kerr talks about, plays that they'll make down the stretch, it's like about hitting singles. I think that's also like an apt analogy for the draft strategy is like, maybe Pajemski and TJD are more hitting singles or doubles, but those are still good hits, I mean, and it also makes sense to swing for home runs on those high potential guys too, right? Like, I mean, if you're able to get a generational player, like it's gonna be in the top of the draft, so it makes sense to go for it then, and knowing that there is also a high chance of striking out. So I don't fault either draft strategy, but it works way better right now. Like just in terms of how those rookies look this year, they look so much more ready, and I don't know that they'll actually play that much, but as people who like, like all fans like young players developing in the system, having somebody to root for, it's helping us keep that young player hope alive, and amongst all these old players. Players.
And you have Kuminga's the guy that could be the one. Right? And it never felt like Moody was like that. It felt like hopefully early on maybe Wiseman could be it as a number 2 pick, and you just you get a couple other guys who are solid. I mean, Patrick Baldwin Jr. Barely played his senior year in high school, barely played for his dad's team at a bad school or a bad college team, and he needed time. Same with Rollins, right? So you had all these guys who barely played, whereas Pajemski, I don't know what year he was he junior or something? Or
he played 2 years.
Okay, so good for him. And then Trace Jackson Davis, 20 and 10 at Indiana his last year out of 4 years. So I expect Jackson Davis to contribute. Pajemski probably ends up behind Corey Joseph ends up in the G League and whatnot. But there's more of a method to the madness, and already the Warriors are they're better. They're better than last season, because everybody says like, oh, the road record last year. But what about the road record? Listen, the road record is like, you got to toss that, because that is an aberration started by a ridiculous event in preseason, right? Where the chemistry was gone. Andrew Wiggins was gone. And that was Poole's best friend on the team. And then he was gone for 3 months. Clay, he was a ghost of himself at the beginning of the season. And then Gary Payton II wasn't here.
Yeah.
And he was, his best quality when he came back was like making Steph laugh when they were both injured on the bench. So they're naturally going to be better. The only thing is that the other teams got better too at the top, right?
Yeah. So do you, you look at if they play 500 on the road, I think they're at 50 wins, right? Just like that, right? Which the West is really crowded. A lot of people are pointing to that, and totally agree that, all the other teams got good too. So that will kind of flatten it out. So, I'm hopeful they get a top 4 seed. I hope that they push for that. I think that they maybe recognize the importance of that, and they're deep enough to pull it off, like by having some older players rest sometimes. So I'm optimistic. The season starts really soon, so I'm pretty optimistic, and having watched some of these preseason games, if they've been ramping up, it's like, I think it's going to be fun, and they've kind of refocused and recalibrated in a smart way. I don't know that it's going to work. I was going to ask you, like, what's your biggest hope, and what's your biggest concern? My biggest concern is, well, I have a 2-part, is I would say that I think they're small. They're really small. And their defense hasn't proven to be very good yet. Right. And maybe that will come along. Maybe that's due to Draymond not playing in the preseason. So I'm a little bit hopeful of that. But man, they're small.
Yeah, they are. They're really small, especially when you throw like 6-foot Chris Paul out there to add insult to injury in terms of that. But that is my concern. I think that's all Warriors fans' concern, is like their size. We all think the same things, right? Their size, their age, and their health. Yeah, age and health are pretty tied together, right? Yeah. And then the fourth thing is like, will Kuminga will he take that next?
Well, that's the biggest hope, right? Like that's my biggest hope.
But since we're talking about Kuminga, like you and I, after the 2021 draft, you had come up with the topic: who's going to be the Warriors' best player and most important player in 2 years and 4 years. Fast forward, right? Well, I think I mentioned Wiseman back then too. Back then, in terms of best player, we said Kuminga in 4 years, and
which would be 2025, right? If we're counting forward from 2021.
Yeah. So we're talking about the beginning of 2025. So he still has 2 seasons.
Okay, I'm like, what year is it right now? Okay, yeah, so we got 2 years. Yeah, I can still envision that.
Yeah, I see a path. I was listening to the Athletic podcast, the Warriors podcast, and they were talking about, I think Slater was talking about how, he could be, where does he ask the guys, like, where do you think Kuminga will rank as he'll be their which best player? And that's the conversation we've been having, right? Like, I see a path in a couple years. I don't think Clay is going to be, as good. I don't think Draymond's going to be
not in 2 years.
Chris Paul won't be here. Steph is the only one because of his game and how he works and how he plays. So as long as Kuminga's still on the team and they don't add somebody like Giannis or something, then I totally still see it as feasible.
And at that point, if he's 4 years into his career and he's become the best player, and the Warriors are still like playoff contenders, then 2 timelines worked out, actually, right? Like, yeah, everybody's talking about like they scrapped 2 timelines. It's like they still, it's still happening. Yeah, we're living it.
Like they just don't have Wiseman, and then they swapped out a big for a big. And then
a small for a small. Yeah,
small for a small, and they're still they're still there.
And I actually think like if they were just playing 2-on-2, like Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis versus Patrick Baldwin and Ryan Rollins, like they would win, right?
I think that they would win.
Like,
yeah. I mean, for as good as we hope those guys were gonna be last season, it's like these guys that they have now are just they're players.
Yeah.
They're players now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we'll see.
I want to see that 2-on-2 though.
I want to see Kuminga versus Moody 1-on-1.
Oh, really? I think I know his name. Love Moses Moody.